So now let us talk about the war that took place in 1962, that is the Chinese invasion in India. Two developments strained these relations. China annexed Tibet in 1950 and thus removed a historical buffer between the two countries. Initially, the government of India did not oppose this operation, but as more information came in about the suppression of Tibet culture, the Indian government grew uneasy. The Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, sought and obtained political asylum in India in 1959. China alleged that the government of India was allowing anti-China activities to take place from within India. Now see, how did conditions started changing, the relations started changing and became more strained, okay, between India and China. So there are two major things जिसकी वजह से इंडिया और चाइना के relations affect हुए, strained हुए and worsen हुए. So first thing is related to the Tibet war, okay, and initially India was supporting China that Tibet is part of China only, but slowly and steadily India got to know about the worsening condition taking place in Tibet, okay. And when India got to know about this worsening condition, so India was a little uneasy about that, but India could not do much because India had already signed the Treaty of Panchsheel, and according to that treaty, both the countries were to respect the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of each countries, okay, both the countries. Now at that time, when the Dalai Lama actually asked for asylum in India in 1959, from there things started turning worse. How? जब दलाई लामा ने इंडिया में असाइलम के लिए अपील किया, इंडिया ने उनका अपील सुन भी लिया एंड दे गेव प्लेस टू दलाई लामा. China actually started accusing India that India is actually letting grow anti-China activities in their territory. China basically India को accuse करने लग गई that India क्या कर रहा है, India anti-China के लोगों को अपने कंट्री में शरण दे रहा है एंड चाइना के अगेंस्ट पॉलिटिक्स कर रहा है, चाइना के अगेंस्ट चीज़ें कर रहा है. So the condition between both the countries got strained and it started getting affected. So first issue was related to what? The Tibet issue, okay. Now what happened? The second issue is related to the border disputes between India and China. A little earlier, a boundary dispute had surfaced between India and China. So before this issue, a little earlier, there was boundary disputes between which countries? China and India. India claimed the boundary was a matter settled in colonial time, but China said that any colonial decision did not apply. Now, when Britishers were also there in India, at that time also some border issues must have surfaced between both the countries and there were tensions between both the countries. So, whole of that issue was settled when Britishers were there. So, India said that this issue had already been settled by the colonial rulers, so why to bring in this issue? But China said, since since Britishers are not there or the colonial rulers are not there, so the colonial decision cannot be applied. So then the dispute was coming. So the main dispute was about the western and the eastern end of long border. China claimed two areas within Indian territory, Aksai Chin area in Ladakh region of Jammu and Kashmir and much of the states of Arunachal Pradesh in what was then called the NEFA Northeastern Frontier Agency. Now if we are talking about, this is India, okay, and this is basically your China, okay, and this is your India, like Sikkim and all this part. We have Nepal. So the extreme borders, the east and the west borders of China, इसमें प्रॉब्लम हो रही थी. लद्दाख का एक एरिया था एंड अरुणाचल प्रदेश के कुछ एरियाज थे, इनको लेकर डिस्प्यूट हो रहा था. सो Aksai Chin, it was an Ladakh region of Jammu and Kashmir, which was part of India, and in Arunachal Pradesh, several areas. At that time, it was called Northeastern Frontier Agency. So between 1957 and 1959, the Chinese occupied the Aksai Chin area, okay, which was in Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir. China ने हमारे इस area को occupy किया and build a strategic road there. It did not just occupy it, और वहाँ पे एक strategic road भी बना दिया. Why is it called strategic? Because it is part of India and you are constructing a road there, so it will lead to further conflict. So that was one way to come into the borders of India. Okay. Yes, despite a very long correspondence and discussion among top leaders, these difficulties could not be resolved. Several small border skirmishes between the armies of the two countries took place. So now this whole, it was actually intervening into India, taking our area and creating roads over there. And these issues, even after talking from top leaders, these issues could not be resolved between both the countries. Do you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis in China, one of the contemporary world politics? While the entire world's attention was on the crisis involving the two superpowers, China launched a swift and massive invasion in October 1962 on both the disputed regions. Now we all know when the Cuban Missile Crisis were going on, and the effect of nuclear power, and we were like, okay, the world might get destroyed. There was so much strain and issues related to a fearful issue was there in the whole world scenario. At that time, China was actually taking advantage of that situation, और उस समय पे in that time period on both these areas which were related to the eastern and the western side कि जो हमारे disputed areas थे उसको capture करने की कोशिश करी. Okay, China launched a swift and massive invasion in October 1962 on both the disputed regions. The first attack lasted for 1 week. Okay, and the Chinese forces captured some key areas in Arunachal Pradesh. First attack कब हुआ? एक week तक. It was a long 1 week attack and they actually took over few parts of Arunachal Pradesh. The second wave of attack came next month. While the Indian forces could block the Chinese advances on the western front in Ladakh, in the east the Chinese managed to advance nearly the entry point of Assam plains. Now where India could actually was stopping China in the Ladakh region, वहीं पर चाइना ने क्या कर लिया था? चाइना ने एक्चुअली असम के एंट्री पॉइंट तक को कैप्चर कर लिया था. Finally, China declared a unilateral ceasefire and its troops withdrew to where they were before the invasion began. So, a one-sided ceasefire started from China. Unilateral is only one. And its troops withdrew to where they were before the invasion began, and then finally उसके troops वापस भी चले गए दो, but then this issue had created further worsening effect. What was that? The China war dented India's image at home and abroad. India had to approach the Americans and the British for military assistance to tie over the crisis. Now see, if you will look at international part, अगर हम अपनी टेरिटरी को ही नहीं बचा पाए, so it will obviously have a bad image of India in terms of international relations. So वही हुआ, जो चाइना का वॉर था उसने हमारी इमेज पे एक डेंट क्रिएट कर दिया था. ओके, नॉट at outside like at international level but within home. In fact within Indians also जो हमारी reputation थी वो down हुई. We started questioning our government. And at that time India ने किसे approach किया? Americans and British for military assistance so that they can cope up with this crisis. Now at that time the Soviet Union remained neutral. Soviet Union, since it was about India and China was influenced from Soviet Union, so Soviet Union was having a very neutral stand. It induced a sense of national humiliation, at the same time strengthened a spirit of nationalism. So India was obviously having humiliation at the international arena also, but at the same time it was working towards its nationalism and towards strengthening India. Some of the top army commanders either resigned or were retired. Now, how were conditions worsening? Our top commanders were either resigning or were at the age of retirement. Nehru's close associate and then defense minister at that time, in 1962, the defense minister was V. Krishna Menon, had to leave cabinet. Nehru's own stature suffered as he was severely criticized for his naive assessment of Chinese intervention and the lack of military preparedness. So basically Indians were criticizing Nehru that Nehru was never prepared for a गुड मिलिट्री एंड नेहरू का जो पूरा असेसमेंट था चाइना को लेकर वो रॉन्ग था. फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम अ नो कॉन्फिडेंस मोशन अगेंस्ट हिज गवर्नमेंट वॉज मूव्ड एंड डिबेटेड इन लोकसभा. You have already read about no confidence motion in class 11th when the opposition party actually asked for majority to prove the majority. So for the first time no confidence motion was asked in the government and it was moved against and was debated in Lok Sabha. Soon thereafter, Congress lost some key by elections to Lok Sabha. The political mood of the country had began to change. Now whole of this Chinese situation ने हमने externally ही affect नहीं किया but internally भी हमारा पूरा political system was affected. Okay, हमारे जो top commanders थे they were either resigning or they were at the age of retirement. Also जो उस समय foreign minister थे V. Krishnan Menon, he also left the cabinet. So the whole image of Nehru was getting down. उनका जितना भी करिश्मा और जितना भी पैशनेट इमेज था it was getting down. And first time the Congress was scrutinized and no confidence motion was passed against his government. So what happened in the internal political system? The Sino-India conflict affected the opposition as well. Okay, the war, Sino is basically China. So in India-China war actually affected our internal political system as well. This and the growing rift between China and the Soviet Union created irreconcilable differences with the Communist Party of India. Now what happened? There was this Communist Party of India which was established in 1920s. You all know CPI. उस CPI में इंडिया और चाइना के स्टैंड को लेकर डिस्प्यूट होने लगे. ओके, एंड CPI was actually divided. So first was the CPI जो actually CPI पार्टी थी and उसमें से जो different who had difference of opinion, that is the CPI Marxist was created. The pro-USSR factions remained with the CPI and moved towards closer tie with the Congress. The other factions was for some time closer to China and was against any ties with the Congress. Now जो CPI-M थी, CPI-M basically against the Congress के, और when IndoChina war was taking place, so CPI actually CPI-M actually supported China. Okay, it did not supported India. CPI-M ने किसे support किया? China को. The party split in 1964. In 1964 CPI-M में से एक faction निकल के आया which was CPI-M. तो पार्टी किसमें divide हो गई? दो में. First was CPI and the other was CPI-M. Okay, and the leaders of the later faction formed the Communist Party of India Marxist, that is CPI-M. In the wake of the China war, many leaders of what became CPI-M were arrested for being pro-China. In fact, when this war was going on, since CPI-M was supporting China, so in that regard, क्योंकि they were going against the country and its nationalist feeling and were trying to break India, so that is why CPI-M leaders were arrested. The war with China alerted the Indian leadership to the volatile situation in the northeastern region. Now what happened? This was first time that India realized no, things can get worse and whole of this political system was getting worse. So it took over control in the northeast regions. Okay, Apart from being isolated and extremely underdeveloped, this region also presented India with the challenge of national integration and the political unity. Now, whole of the northeastern regions, okay, it is very underdeveloped region, and इंडिया को फर्स्ट टाइम लगा कि कैसे अगर इन रीजन्स में ब्रेक थ्रू आ गया एंड वो CPIM की तरफ इंक्लाइंड हो गए, सो इंडिया की यूनिटी को बहुत ज़्यादा थ्रेट है. ओके, सो लुकिंग एट ऑल दैट मैटर, इंडिया एक्चुअली वर्कड फॉर इट और उस चैलेंज को अच्छे से लिया, एंड इंडिया थॉट फॉर नेशनल इंटीग्रेशन इन एंड पॉलिटिकल यूनिटी इन northeast regions. The process of its reorganization began soon after China War. Now जो northeast region था उसको reorganize करने का पूरा process इंडो चाइना वॉर के ख़त्म होने के बाद स्टार्ट हुआ. ओके, नागालैंड वॉज ग्रांटेड स्टेटहुड. मणिपुर एंड त्रिपुरा, दो यूनियन टेरिटरीज वर गिवन द राइट्स टू इलेक्ट देयर ओन लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज. ओके, अब इसको मोर एडवांस किया गया, उनके पॉलिटिकल सिचुएशंस को लुक इन किया गया, उनको नो मोर दे वर व्यूड एज इग्नोरेंट और अंडर डेवलप्ड रीजन्स, और वहाँ पे वर्क करने की कोशिश करी ऑन द लूप होल एरियाज.